Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron. We're going to be repeating my planning show that I did a few times in the past this year when the new people got elected to office, and maybe even a little bit before that, before the budget. And I'm doing the program again because I'm going to be making some additions to it at the request of many people around town and some of the people at the university to clarify some points that were made in the show. So this is going to happen, and first we're going to play the program as it was before, and then I'm going to make some additions at the end, so hang in there. In my Back to the Basics program after the election, I talked a lot about the critical path method of planning and budgeting. It's called CPM. You can see it on the internet if you look on the internet. And PERT, Program Evaluation and Review Technique. These are techniques used by people around the world to plan projects, programs, etc., and to review progress along the way, and to spur changes when necessary by using management by exception and management by objectives. So these are techniques that a lot of people use. I'm going to explain them tonight because on my Let's Pass the Budget Back to the Basics before May 31st, I told everybody that I would replay these a couple times, this old program, so they could see how it ties into the program I did after May 31st. Before May 31st. Budget. Well, the budget passed. I looked around. I couldn't find the original DVD for Back to the Basics #1 that I did after the election. I looked around. We didn't have it down here at Charter. My friends didn't have a copy of it. I couldn't use the one that I put onto YouTube. So here I am re-recording it, and I'm hoping it's going to help you because this new group that's in, things have happened since the post-election program. We now have Marcia Sterling as mayor, who's very, 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 very financially astute, perhaps the best financier we're ever going to have in the mayor's seat in this town and on the board of finance and selectmen for a long, long time to come. So tonight I'm not going to talk too much about other things. I'm going to talk a bit about these CPM and PERT review techniques that you can find on the internet. And we're going to say here now, as we flip up to the next one, that the charter, and I don't have it word for word here, you can go get a copy of the charter at the town hall, in the town clerk's office. Look under selectmen's duties and all that, and you'll see that the selectmen, also known as the Board of Finance, also responsible for the Board of Finance, they're the Board of Finance and the selectmen. They're responsible for the finances of the town, bottom line. Ultimately, they're responsible, nobody else. So they have to make sure that the town is run in a responsible financial manner. Now, over the years, we've had many people on the Board of Selectmen and on the Board of Finance, and we got some now that know very little about finance. I often question whether some of them can either add or subtract. They're more interested in politics. And finance, managing finances is a lot like mathematics. 1 and 1 is 2. Very difficult to say it's 3 or 4. If you talk to any mathematician, he knows that 1 and 1 is 2. Or she knows that 1 and 1 is 2. And when you begin to talk to financial people, they speak the language of finance. They take certain approaches to things, especially if they have masters in business administration or masters in finance, or a lot of education, working with people who really know those areas and are used to being successful in those areas. They can communicate with each other. Now we're in trouble. We're in real trouble. Financially. Gets worse every day and every week and every Selectman Board of Finance meeting. Because I have so much experience around the world with this kind of thing, I can see through all that. I can see what's happening. A lot of other people can too. But unfortunately, most people can't. Because they don't have the financial background, they don't have a mathematical background, they don't have a business background, and they can be easily fooled. But in times of financial desperation, which we're in right now, and I'm not going to go into all that, you can hear about that on the Buddha Hazy show, you can hear about that on the Dave LaPointe show, you can hear about that by watching every selectman meeting on Channel 15, or once they put it up on the internet, contacting the Charter CTV 13 on their internet, and you can see replays of that. They also replay on Channel 15 the selectmen meetings from week to week. They play them a few times, and if you call them because you have a special need for a group or something, they might put it up and play it for you, the last selectmen meeting or the one before or whatever, ones that are not on the internet. But in times of financial desperation, the Finance Board must take control. The Finance Board's always in control, but if the town's running smoothly and everything is running according to Hoyle, and we're not in the financial depths that we're in today, and a lot of new money's coming into town from growing the grand list, and the money's being spent wisely, and it's being everybody's planning properly, and the whole town knows exactly where the money's coming from and how it's being spent, and there's no surprises along the way. In the finance business, people say, Brian, we don't want any surprises. We want a plan that's accurate. We want to review it all the time to make sure if it changes, we can deal with that change one way or the other. But we don't want any surprises. So normally the Finance Board works with the town manager and the Board of Education and everybody else, the state, and anybody else who's involved in our finances from year to year, budget to budget, and over time. We've been in financial trouble here for many, 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 many years, and it hasn't all been Henry's fault. Some of it has, but not all of it. A lot of it is pure mismanagement by our finance boards in the past, and the fact that they didn't listen to the advice they were given by many, many, many people, including the auditors, and they just don't have a system that reliably runs our finances in our town. So they're normally involved, and as long as everything's going fine, they can be minimally involved. But when times of great desperation, like we're in now, the Finance Board must take control, which they have since the Republicans won the last election. Now, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an unaffiliated voter, which is 52% of the voters in our town, and I try to go with, when I vote for people, usually I first want to make sure they're financially responsible. And if they're financially responsible, they'll probably get my vote. Not always, but most often. I don't care which party they're in or whether they're independent or running off the seat of their pants or whatever. But we really need help here. So this new Finance Board, which is anchored by a very, very financially astute mayor, well-educated, business degrees, finance degrees, from some of the best schools in the country. I've already talked about that on the other program. Other people that talk about it all the time, and it's in the newspaper. This new board is urgently coordinating the production of a plan for success. They're trying to take responsible techniques that they learned at some of the best business schools in the country. They're trying to listen to people who do understand all that and have knowledge of that, and they're trying to put together a plan for success. This plan for success must have demonstrable and measurable milestones. You have to know where you're going, how you're going to get there. That's management by objectives. And then you have to deal with exceptions every day, week, hour, whatever. That's management by exception. And to do that, you can use tools available in the industry, in the world, in all industries, in the financial part of the business. CPM's one, PERT's another. After you use them long enough, then they become ingrained in your approach, and you'll use them. You'll take that approach normally because it's what produces success. So now that's what the current mayor and Board of Finance are trying to do, at least 5 of the people on there. And as I mentioned before, there are 2 of the people on the Board of Finance that I don't think are very astute financially, and for many reasons don't always agree with the approach that the majority in the present Finance Board are taking. So they're trying to get demonstrable and measurable milestones and show them to everybody in town, the newspapers, anybody who's a resident or whatever, putting them up on the website, all that kind of thing. They're trying to have the best plan that they can put together based on the information they have, and they don't have all the information. I'm going to talk a bit about that later. They're trying to put it together, obtain the information from anybody they can get it from, whether they like them or not, whether they agree with them or not. They're trying to get the facts. Once they get the facts, they got to get them on a table for everybody to see, like they're trying to do now. And they should help them produce a plan that they can get agreed by all the stakeholders in town, everybody that's involved. There are many, 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 many people involved when you consider all the town entities, all the people that supply to the town, and all the people that receive from the town. It's very complicated. It needs to be demonstrable. It needs to be out in the open. Now, you're never going to get to the point where everything's totally demonstrable and out in the open, because there are people all the time that are trying to hide the information. I mentioned that last time I did this, that there was a person at British European Airways when I was there that went around betting everybody 10 cents that we would fail. Of course, he ended up being wrong. We didn't fail, but we did have to change the plans a little bit along the way, and I'll talk a bit about that as we go on, that process. Now, the critical path method at the top level, which was the Finance Board, is kind of simple. When you put a plan together, or a budget together, or whatever you're doing, you have a start and an end. And then you have milestones along the way that you can plan and you can measure against throughout the year and take action when necessary over a period of time. Now, on this very simple top layer critical path, I've just showed the start, activity 1, which might say is a month into the plan. Activity 2 might end 3 months into the plan. Activity 3 might end 6 months into the plan. Number 4 might be 8 months into the plan. Number 5 might be 10 months into the plan, and the end might be 12 months. And now, as you know, for this year's fiscal budget, we are towards the end of this year now, and we do have a lot of upheaval on the budget side for many, many reasons. So that's what critical path means. If the plan is done properly, the Finance Board should only have to deal with a top layer of with a critical path, unless, of course, there's a problem. Then they have to dig deeper. They have to go into lower level plans, for example, the police department's plan, the fire department's plan, the town garage's plan, or any other plan that we have at a lower level than the critical path at the top. So that's what we mean when we say the critical path. That's what is very, very critical at the highest level. And as long as everything's going fine and we have a track record over the years of doing things fine, and we have competent people in the jobs and we're using good techniques, then this will be pretty easy. But we're a long way from that. I would say we're at least 5 years from that, maybe more. Now, I want to show you once again the proper way of doing plans and proceeding, and the improper way. The proper way, and I demonstrate it with triangles, I've done this thousands of times around the world when people come to ask me to speak about this stuff, or when I'm in the middle of a troubled situation, I have to explain it to the people involved, the stakeholders. I use the same approach, have been for many years. So the left side there, you see, is the right way to do it. You got to get all the problems on the table, all the information, all the facts on the table at the earliest stage of planning. Now, that's a difficult thing, especially when some people don't want to produce the facts because they think it might hurt their reputation, or their political party, or their organization, or their vendor, or whatever they may be. So it's very difficult, but it has to happen. So if we get all the information out at the beginning, then we can proceed down the slope of that triangle. We review it along the way at every one of those bars you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. This is just an example. You could have more or less in there, depending on how well your town's being run. And then you make decisions along the way to bring it back in line, if necessary, back to plan, or to do something else if something comes up along the way that needs an emergency decision, an urgent decision. And that's the way to go, from start to finish. And you can take a budget as one example. Now, the improper way to go is kind of the way we've been going over the years for a long time that I know of, and that is going up the triangle to infinity. And the problem is, you start out, you don't have all the facts, you don't have all the information, they're not disclosed to everybody. Nobody can say to you, hey, that fact isn't a fact, that's wrong. Nobody can do any of that. So you go up towards infinity and you never ever achieve your plan. You get worse and worse and worse and worse in trouble like we are right now. Now, the non-financial people, and most of them are in the liberal Democratic Party, some of the Republican liberals, some of the unaffiliated liberals, have been running this way for many years. They've been going up the triangle, now we're in deep trouble. So, proper circling back when necessary as facts turn up has to happen. Because what most people say is that you can't, everything won't be 100% right for every decision you make. What you have to do is make decisions, publish those decisions to everybody you can, and the reasons why, and all the facts you can garner, or all the facts that are available. Sometimes they aren't all the facts, but they're all that are available. You get them out there, and then you open your ears, and you encourage feedback. You encourage people to come to you, short, tall, thin, large, whatever. You might not like any of them, but you got to encourage them to come to you with feedback to make sure you're going in the right direction. Now, this is where we get into an interesting thing, and when you turn to the next slide, you're going to see that even if you're going in the proper direction, down the slope, you will run into obstacles along the way. So what'll happen is you'll be moving forward, then all of a sudden you hit into a problem, you have to go back a couple steps, you got to circle around, then you go back out again forward, and then you go back a few steps, and then you go out again, and this is just a simple example. It could be much worse than this. Now on the other side, you got the same sort of problem. If you don't come up with any all the facts up in the beginning, as you go all the way closer and closer to the end, then you got to circle all the way back and start again and go up. So that's what I mean by going to infinity. So when I hear a lot of the comments on TV and in select meetings and in the newspapers about the current Board of Finance and selectmen, they're criticized, of course, for not having a perfect plan. Well, you're not going to have a perfect plan. But they stepped into the middle of this right-hand side triangle, where all the facts weren't on the table, where all the facts aren't out in the open. So they had to begin to try to get all these facts out into the open, despite the fact that a lot of people don't want the facts to be out in the open for political reasons. And as I said on the first time I did this program, politicians don't like transparency. They don't want all the facts to be on the table. They don't like to have to meet objectives, timescales. They don't like any of that stuff. So it's very hard for them to succeed and produce a triangle that we can go down. Now, on the other hand, financial people love to have the facts on the table. They like to know exactly what's needed and what the problems are and what the advantages are, and they want to put a plan together to be able to do that. Now I want to show you another thing, and this is a little, each one of those lines that's on the critical path represents a whole network of planning. For example, the police department could have a plan that looks like this, with all kinds of activities in it that feed into the top layer. The Board of Education could have a plan like this, much more complex, of course. The schools, the library, everybody can have one and should have one. And then they feed their information up to the top, and it gets plugged into the system. If you have aids like CPM or PERT, programming computer type stuff, that helps. If you don't, you got to do it manually. Some are simple networks or plans, some are very complex. Some require a lot of reviews, some not many. If they're on schedule and they're going to make their plans, not too bad a deal. So it's pretty complex and needs to be watched. That's why you need to use management by exception to keep an eye on it. Now, the current mayor has set up a few meetings that I'm tickled pink to see. One is every 2 weeks she reviews with the town manager and the financial director on a Thursday afternoon the progress of the financial plan. And it's trying to find out whether all the facts are accurate or not. So far, a lot of them have not been accurate. We thought we were getting some extra $200,000 in from somewhere. Well, we didn't get it, and we're not going to get it. We thought we were spending $100,000 less on something. Now we're spending $100,000 more on it. So it's very important. The other thing she set up is very important too, and that is a series of meetings to review the plan for getting more, to grow the grand list, to getting more profitable additional recurring revenue in town, which is very, 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 very high priority for us if we want to get out of this financial pickle we're in without killing the present taxpayers and reducing their value and worth and getting them to leave town. So we do this with facts. We do this with critical plans, path plans. We do this by having dependencies on other people and checking to see that they're being met and looking down the road to see if they're going to be met. I often say this is a bit like an engineer driving a train. This finance board's got to drive the train. They got to look down the track way down and see if they can see any obstacles before they get there and hit them. So that's very important. They got to have time scales. Everything's got to have a time scale. It's got to be defined properly. You got to know exactly what we're going to do. Now, they are trying to get that, like what's the time scale for fixing all the roads? Which roads are going to be fixed? When are they going to be fixed by? When will we be done with our $700,000 spending in the next budget on the roads? So there are going to be plans all over the place, and people are going to be pinned down to time scales and dependencies because that's the financial way to do things. And then as you review these things, now the Harvard Business School always says, well, I'll review them every 3 months. We're in pretty intensive care now, so we got to kind of review them all the time, daily, hourly. So like I mentioned, intensive care in the hospital, we're in intensive care here, our town is now, and our new mayor is retired, and she can spend a lot of time on this. She has other activities too where she devotes her time to charity and things, so she's not totally involved, but she is throwing herself right into the middle of this for no revenue, no pay, and we're going to get the benefit of her education experience and success over the years. She lives in Winchester, Connecticut, on an old farm with her husband. So we need to also have the definitions verified by outside experts where necessary. Definitions need to be verified. Don't be afraid to use outside experts wherever you can who really know their stuff. And I do see on the agenda for this Finance Board and Selectmen is probably hire a different group to audit our books rather than use the same people that we have now in that area, in addition to these people. So it's good to have the experts look at things, no matter what it is. It's always good to have them look at things, and it's probably less expensive to do it that way in the long run, although it will cost a little money up front. And then this Finance Board has to conduct periodic progress and decision-making reviews with action items. Whenever you see something that isn't going to make the plan and need to be in action to get it back on plan, whenever you see something that's going to be disastrously over planned, then you got to get some actions up there to contain that and figure out how you're going to solve that problem. So that's very important. Now, what I want to say is you don't have to listen to me. I'm going to put the back to the basics sign back up now, and you just watch the selectmen meetings. Go to the selectmen meetings, call the mayor on the phone at the town hall, talk to her, go down and see her. She has office hours 2-3 days a week because she's retired and she can afford to give you the time. And she is more than willing to go to other activities you might have in town, to listen to you, to discuss with you ways to improve the situation in the town. So everybody has to get involved. And my own advice is that watch her in action for the next 3-4 months. Because I'm sure when you watch her and the Finance Board in action, you will see the good parts of the Finance Board that I'm talking about tonight and the bad parts. And you will want to re-elect her and the other good finance people on there. We need people who understand finance, who can get us back on the right track, and will stick it out long enough to get the job done, which probably will take about 5 or more years, maybe 10. I don't know. But you're going to see more and more. Each select meeting, some new bad news is going to pop up. And then someday, that will stop being bad news and we'll be more or less on the right track.
Okay, I want to add now to this program, because I was requested to do so by many people in town who have watched the program over the weeks, including some of the students at the university that I do a lot of work with on the computers down there. And I want to try to explain some of the things that people ask questions about. The first thing I want to say is that all plans that are made should have SLAC, S-L-A-C-K, SLAC, built right into the plan. Because you're always going to run into unknowns. Most people think that when you make a plan, you're probably only going to be 55 or 60% right, maybe even a little less if you don't have good people. And that along the way, you're going to make a lot of changes. Like I showed on my triangles, you're going to have to circle back quite a bit when you find new information, and that information comes in. Now, as you know, our new mayor is always asking everybody at all meetings and sending out questionnaires and doing everything to find out more information, more facts, to see if we're headed in the right direction or we might have to circle back. So in your plans, you need to build in some SLAC, and that gives you a little extra time anticipating that things will change and that you won't have such a tight plan that you'll go out of the bounds of the plan, which means not managed properly for less revenue or more revenue, and not managed properly for less expenses or more expenses. So SLAC is very important, very critical to any plan. If you don't have it in there, then you're not really being realistic. So you have to anticipate that there will be a lot of changes along the way, and one way or another, you need to leave time in the plan for that. That's called SLAC. Now, you're going to talk a little bit about another question that I get all the time from people is, what about expenses and revenue? Now, over the last few years, when you see our audits when they're finished, and the audits that are finished already. And of course, you now have a copy, and it's on the internet, as the mayor promised it would be. All the information for this current year's budget, year 14-15, that's on the internet. You can see that. Well, we know how much revenue we're expecting in that plan. We know that. And we know roughly what the expenses are going to be. I don't know how much slack is built into the plan, but we do have an expense number for the year, and we do have a revenue number for the year. Now, those are very important. But what's even more important now that we have those is to have expense and revenue projections for the next 3 to 5 years, which is sort of the Harvard Business School and other business school approaches. So we have it for this year, and we know what it was in previous years, and especially once we get the audits done. We still got a couple of outstanding audits before we really know the truth. But once we get those by the end of this year, calendar year 2014, as promised by the Board of Finance, then we will have that information, and we can begin, we should be beginning now, but we can begin to project what are the expenses and what are the revenue for the next 3 years and 5 years. Now, these are projections, and the way you do projections is you try to say, similar to the way you do a budget, is how many, what do we know about? What do we know that's certainly going to come in on the additional revenue side over the years, or is it going to be less revenue? Do we know that? And the same on the expense side. Are we going to have higher expenses, or is there a possibility we might have less expenses? And it's very difficult on the expense side because we have built in strong unions into our system here, and they will be pushing hard for raises, increases, and other things over the years. And we know that expenses usually have a tendency to go up unless we can fight them back in a responsible way by integrating things, combining things, dealing with other people, and all that kind of thing to what I would call manage these budgets back on the expense side, not just chop them or anything like that. It got to be done rationally. And there's plenty of ways to do that. There's a lot of slack built into that area, and that can be looked at. But it does need attention, and it needs to be looked at. So now on the revenue side, it's the same sort of thing. Do we know of any additional revenue, increasing profitable, increasing tax or revenue that's going to come into this town? And it has to be recurring revenue. One-time revenue is nice, but you got to be very careful about building any one-time revenue into a plan, and without really telling everybody that is not recurring, and it's a one-time revenue. And as you know, when they built this plan for the year 14-15, first thing they did was eliminate any one-time revenue or any one-time expense, and that's how they began the plan. The other thing I want to say about this is that the responsibility for this, coming up with this 3 to 5 year plan, does lie with the Finance Board. Because, as you know, the charter says that the Finance Board is responsible for the finances of the town. And it doesn't say just 1 year's worth of finances. I mean, we need to know where we're headed, where we're going over the next 3 to 5 years. And I personally think that's still the responsibility of the Finance Board. They can delegate activities, as the charter does, to certain members of the community, the EDC, for example, the town manager, for example, the finance director, for example, other commissions and committees, if any of them are in the game. But in the end, it's the Finance Board has to make sure we have these plans. Now, what I do usually is I say, okay, we can't get any information. We'll assume that the revenue is going to go up 0 each year for the next 3 to 5 years. That'll wake people up. That'll get their attention. And you can ask them if they know of any revenue that's coming in that you're not aware of, Finance Board. And then you can open your ears and you can have meetings with them, you can talk to them, you can listen to them. Or you can ask them, are there any way that you know that we can get any more revenue in town. And something similar to that has happened now with the questionnaire to all the business people in town to say, how can we help you improve your business? That's a little bit, we don't have a tendency to ever measure that. You know, we don't know, for example, if you ask the finance board right now, what are the projections for the next 3 to 5 years, you're not going to get anything back. You might get the expense one, which might be extrapolated to, say, the cost of living or something like that. And it's difficult with the Board of Education, too. That's 60% of our budget. So the Finance Board must get together with the town and the Board of Education, and they must come up with these projections. Maybe they could nominate a committee. Maybe they could be the committee themselves. There's a lot of things that could possibly happen. But the EDC is not responsible for growing the grand list. They're responsible for helping to grow the grand list, and by searching for opportunities and bringing them to the attention of the management of the town. And then in the end, though, the finance board is responsible. And not having a planning manager, that's not the end of the world. The responsibilities are still there. We still have to do it. So with or without a planning manager, we have to have these projections. And it'd be hard to get away with them in any business without any projections for it. And it's even hard to get away with it in your own family. So what I want to say is that it is critical, very critical, to estimate these revenue and expense decline or growth in either area or for the next 3 to 5 years. And you have to manage this very carefully. You have to make it public. You have to let everybody know. And then you have to accept feedback. That's management by exception. And in the absence of anything, you can't do it. Just put out 0 for revenue and put out the annual over the last 10-year average in inflation, and put that in there. And that will scare the pants off of everybody who reads it, and then maybe you'll get some attention paid to getting it resolved, because the taxpayers can't just keep taking extra taxes all the time unless they know exactly why, unless they feel that budgets have been responsible, and unless they can afford it. And in our present state of turmoil, which we'll be in for quite a while, they're very, very, very doubtful that things are going to get any better before they get worse. We've had a rough tax year this year. We've been taxed people for things we said we were going to use the money for and then did not use them for that. Like we said we were going to put in the fund balance, and we ended up paying old bills with it. That was $1 million, over $600,000. So, we're in tough times right now. So what I wanted to add here is that everybody's got to pay a lot of attention to the growth in the revenue. Now, I'm a revenue guy. I also like to see balanced budgets, and I like to see expenses spent wisely, especially my money. Now, often I talk to my own investment man down in New York City, and I say to him, investment manager, can you tell me how much money I'm going to make this year on my investments I have around the world? And he says to me, Brian, if I could tell you that and answer that question, I'd be a rich man today. That's a very difficult question. I don't have the knowledge. I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that on average over the last so many years, we have probably averaged 5% growth in your type of portfolio. Some others it's maybe more. So others it might be less if they're more conservative. So for planning purposes, on the revenue side of your plan for you and Joyce and your family, you can use a number like 5%, but we'll keep a close watch on it. And if we have a big drop in the market, we are very well diversified, but if we have a deep drop in the market, then we have to climb back up the hill, and that'll probably be 5% a year to get back even again, depending on how bad it was. So we in families, we have to kind of project
what revenue is going to come into our family over the next 3 to 5 years, and we have to kind of plan accordingly for that. Some people go out and get another job. Some people get 2 extra jobs. My dad sometimes had 3 extra jobs. Other people retire because they think they have enough money to live on for the rest of their life and support their family. So there's all kinds of extremes here. But everybody has to have a rough idea. And that's why I say, if you don't have any better information, plan on 0 for revenue for the next 3 to 5 years increase, or even less. Cut it if you have to. If you see that it's going to drop, then you better put it in that projection. Now on the expense side, just the opposite. Plan on inflation at least. If you know, of course, that you got some big expenses coming in, then they should be built into the plan. If you know you got some big revenues coming in that are recurring, then you should build those into the plan. And if they're not recurring, you got to be careful how you build them in. Usually I would put those into the fund balance if they were non-recurring, and then judiciously pass it out during the budgeting process. But if you can give everybody a pretty good idea where they stand, where they're headed over the next 3 to 5 years, and ask for their help and ask for their input on how it can be improved in any way whatsoever, then you will begin to have one team working for the good of the town rather than different factions fighting with each other, squabbling with each other, and holding each other back. That doesn't do us any good whatsoever. So once the facts are on the table, we can all see down the road 3 to 5 years, like the engineer I keep talking about, looking for cows on the track, and then take measures to face that. Now, we've got a couple good things that have been set up here by this latest group that came in. And if it was in the last administration, we could often not even get the finance director to the meetings. I can understand if they're on vacation or they're ill, but the finance director should be at every selectman meeting, finance board meeting, and tell the truth and get all the facts out on the table. Now, I would never question that they wouldn't tell the truth unless they were told to, or somebody didn't invite them to the meeting or something like that. But they should come. But even when the finance director comes to the meeting, remember, the finance board is in control. They can ask any questions they want, and they expect answers to those questions. And especially when you have people on the finance board that know probably more than the finance director with education and experience, and often knows more, of course, than the rest of the people that have been elected that have no finance experience whatsoever except in their own house, and that may or may not be successful as we need to be as a town. So we got to do that. We've got to have that happen. Now, they have set up meetings every other week before the selectmen meetings with the finance board, and anybody else who wants to attend. I guess they invite the press now. They invite anybody to go. It's an open meeting. Town manager, finance director, and the selectmen that are also the finance board, and they review the finances every 2 weeks before the selectmen meeting, so they can find out if we're on track. They can find out if we're overspending or underspending, or if there's some big problem has come up or new information has come up, and they can manage it on that bi-weekly basis. I'm also certain that others are looking at it on a weekly basis, some of the finance board, and they're keeping a close eye on all that because they need to manage by exception every 2 weeks and make decisions if necessary to stay on track, both revenue-wise and expense-wise. Now, what I'm hoping is that sooner or later they set up a similar set of meetings before each select meeting for the growth of the grand list, and they call in all the people that are responsible for helping to grow the grand list. And they get the town manager in there. They get the EDC chairman in there, and they get all finance board members, and they review the projected 3 to 5 year plan for the revenue, and also make sure, of course, that the next this year is in shape as well, and then take actions while they have to for any of this. So I'm hoping that happens. It hasn't been set up yet. There's no reason it can't be. The finance board is very strong, and they should be stronger They should set this up and watch it, because if we don't get any additional profit recurring revenue to grow in this town, we're in deep trouble. All the expense money, which will grow, will be passed to the people that are currently here, and their properties are devaluing and they're leaving town and that kind of thing. So it's not very pretty, and it has to be changed. And we really have to face the music. We have to get the facts on the table. People won't like to see them. They'll try to blame individuals. They'll try to blame the past. They'll try to blame the future. They'll try to blame anything. But we do have things coming into town. And whenever you ask anybody how much is the revenue going to grow, they can't tell you. But they do tell you, well, you know, there might be a donut shop, and there might be this, and there might be that. And boy, it's a lot of good news, and we're having parades, and we're going to have things in the park. And then I always say, yeah, but how much is our revenue going to grow each year for the next 3 to 5 years, and how much is our expenses either going to decrease or be covered? And you don't get any answers for that. It's very, 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 very difficult. So a lot of people question me about that. They're wondering why we don't do that. Why can't we get this revenue plan that we keep talking about all the time? You know, I sat in meetings and watched them on TV and read papers where nobody can ever seem to sum this kind of stuff up. It's always, we're doing a great job, we're all having picnics, and we're doing this, and we're working together, and blah, 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 but when they cannot define it. So we're getting now closer to the end of our time. I think I'm going to wrap it up here and say to everybody, please pay attention to the revenue as well as the expenses. Please try to manage by objectives and exception. Please try to follow these principles that I've outlined in here over this program, and you can get from most MBAs that you talk to if you have the vocabulary to talk to these types of people, the background, the experience, or you know, the education, and try to do that. And it should be done publicly. Everybody should know exactly what the truth is. Now, you have to keep some things confidential, because some people might not want you to say they're in a process of trying to buy a company or anything. So then in that case, you'd say prospect A, prospect B, prospect C, and you'd use rough amounts, and you wouldn't give away any secrets. But you got to, the finance board, of course, would have to know the correct information, but some of it might have to be with help from the public for a while. But once everybody builds up trust in the finance board, that won't be a problem anymore. So we've got a long way to go. We've got to keep trying. And if you're watching this program or anything like that, please request from the mayor and from the finance board members and from the EDC chairman and from anybody else, the town manager, a projection for revenue and expenses over the next 3 to 5 years. For that, I thank you very much. Don't forget, we got an election coming up on the 13th of September. It's a Saturday from 8 in the morning. I guess it's 6 in the morning to 8 at night. Sorry, 6 in the morning to 8 at night. And I also want to say that it's very important that we keep a strong finance board, that we elect the right people in there, and over the next few weeks and maybe a few months, I'm going to be giving you some examples of how this finance board is trying to follow these principles that we have outlined in this program tonight. With that, thank you very much. See you in a few weeks.